I'm Leilani Farha in Ottawa, Canada, and I'm the advocate.
I'm Fredrik Gertten in Malmö, Sweden, and I'm the filmmaker. And you're listening to our Pushback Talks.
You are.
What happens today?
Today is a very different day. After 3 years of knowing Fredrik Gertten, I get to actually interview him. Something I've never done before.
Oh my God. It's
buckle up.
Okay, I will try to. We're actually turning the mic around. Okay.
We are.
But there's no camera. Well, there's a zoom because you're so far away. But still, you're there. Okay.
I'm here. I'm way over here.
Go. What do you have in mind?
Well, maybe we should tell people.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what we have to tell. So I did a film called Push. It's a documentary film called Push that is about the global housing crisis. And Leilani was the main character of that film in the role as a UN Special Rapporteur on adequate housing. So the global expert on housing. Now, over to you.
That's right. Well, and that's how we actually know each other, isn't it? And it's out of Push that Pushback Talks came. But I want to focus our 30 or so minutes on the making of Push and just ask you questions, some of which have been in my brain for some time and I've never asked you, and some of which I've heard other people ask you. But I thought maybe if I asked you, you might have a different answer. I don't know. But you'll recall, Fredrik, that the way we met, because you initiated it. I think the story goes you were following me on Twitter for some time and eventually read an article where I was quoted, maybe?
Yeah.
Out in Vancouver. And then you decided that you were going to direct tweet me to see if we might have a conversation. So you did on November 28th, 2016. I still have that tweet. You reached out and you said, hey, I'm interested in making a film about housing. Can we have a Skype call? And I replied 45 minutes later to say, sure, let's have a Skype call. And eventually we did. But my question to you is, when you reached out on November 28th, what stage were you at with the film? Why did you reach out to me? What were you thinking? Like, was I going to be a researcher for you? Was I a connector? What were you thinking?
That's a valid question.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. My process is a little bit weird. I gather information, thoughts. I read a lot of articles. I follow a lot of people on Twitter, and I'm basically looking for sentences or stuff that makes me understand something. And then when I read this quote by you in this Vancouver newspaper, there was something you talked about, financialization of housing, that said, oh, wow, this is interesting. And of course, in a film, in a doc film, you need people who speak, and you need people who are out with some kind of project, they want to reach somewhere. So of course I was also looking for characters for the film. I don't know if I was looking for a main character when I was contacted you, but there was something intriguing about you. And it's also something very, very cool with the role of us being a UN Special Rapporteur. Yeah. So that was something.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And unlike most people, you actually knew what a UN Special Rapporteur does, because my predecessor at the time, Raquel Rolnick, had been in one of your films. So you actually had some sense of the role. And
to be honest,
presumably
not. Because when I filmed Raquel Rolnick for Bike versus Cars, she is an urbanist professor in Sao Paulo, Brazil. I know she was extremely busy. She had very little time for me, and the reason that she was busy was that she had this mission for the UN. But I didn't really know how it worked, to be honest.
Okay.
I knew that there was a system of special rapporteurs, but that was like some kind of vague knowledge, you know. I think I know a bit more now.
Right. So after that tweet, if I recall, we had a couple of conversations, and through those Skype conversations, we landed. One thing that amazed me actually was that we had landed on the same person, Saskia Sassen. So you had independently, I think, maybe read her book or read articles in The Guardian she had written, or somehow you had become really interested in Saskia. And I independently, and independent of you in the film, had become interested in Saskia because I was writing a report on financialization and she's such a big thinker. And you had suggested that maybe we should meet in London and interview Saskia. So we arranged to do that. It worked well with my own schedule. I was heading to Geneva anyway. So at that point, we meet. You had actually almost finished the interview with Saskia by the time I showed up. But I'm interested to know what was that for you? And was it testing ground? What were you thinking might happen by me interviewing Saskia for the film?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I was interested in Saskia. I've been in contact with her already long before I was direct tweeting you the first time. So Saskia was much ahead in my research. But I've also the experience that these kind of super duper experts like Saskia are not really material for a main character of the film. So, and I was also interested to see if there was a way of filming with an expert talking to somebody, so create more of a film scene out of it. But the thing is that that's complicated because you might not ask my questions. So I would have to direct two people. So you were on your way from the airport. Saskia was on her way. She said, I'm going to Rome soon. I'm going to meet the Pope. So I started to shoot, and I basically made the full interview with Saskia before you arrived. But I put the camera in its position so it looked like she was talking to you, basically. So you, when you came, you sat down in front of her at the same position I was sitting, and then we get the feeling in the film that she actually talks to you, which is a lie.
No. There's one scene where there's a couple of scenes where we are actually in conversation. When she asks me if I'm a lawyer,
that's true, and
if I deploy that I need to deploy the law. But one thing that's super interesting about what you said, from my perspective, is this nervousness that you might have that I won't ask the questions that you need asked and answered in order to make your film. And I have to say that was a tension within me for the entire filming, because I needed the work to feel like it was part of my work and part of my genuine journey and it was a genuine journey to learn more about financialization and its impact. But I did feel a tension, like, does this director, especially back then, I didn't know you at all, is he getting what he needs, what he wants? I remember feeling that in that Saskia interview. I was at a total loss. I'd never been part of a documentary film, obviously, not like that. And I had no clue what you wanted, what you didn't want.
And it was actually, I mean, we met for the first time. We were in the same room for the first time ever at Saskia's home in London. And you came with Bruce Porter with a lot of bags and stuff straight from the airport. And so it was a kind of a special situation, which is like, that happens to be quite normal in my life, that we get into special situations. But you know what? My technique, or whatever you can call it, is that I listen a lot to what people are saying, and I'm trying to get sentences out that explains something for me. So so sometimes if you would put the questions, it would have been maybe more between two experts, two people who already know a lot, and there's a risk that you will leave out the audience. And I have to be thinking all the time about the audience.
That's right.
and also to get sentences that my editor will accept. He would hate if I came back with, well, here's an opening, here's a part of a sentence, but the rest is like, we're lacking, half of the sentence, because that's also sometimes how we talk. So that's the day after, I think in London, we were at your sister's home, and I made a first more in-depth interview with you. And I think I was a little bit tough on you, because I really wanted you to say things over and over again, so I could get the full sentences, the full understanding of your view, of your work, and so on. And of course, that's
worst interview of my life.
That's probably not what a normal news reporter would do, because you cut much quicker out and in and out. But for a doc, you need different kind of material. So I felt that if you should be a part of this project, you also have to understand this is how it will be. It will be some kind of work. It's not for free, and it's in one way it's better to try you out in the beginning. I understand it was a tough one, but there was some other personal reasons to that too, wasn't it?
Well, there were a couple of personal reasons. I mean, there were one thing that people wouldn't know if you hadn't been part of a documentary film is so many of the interviews I did, you were standing or sitting right behind me, helping me determine what the next question would be. And that ended up being, for me, super helpful, because then I could relax more and not doubt myself, because you were telling me, well, I want you to go, say this or ask this or whatever. So I knew you were getting what you needed. I mean, documentary filmmaker, you work on a shoestring budget, and I was super conscious the whole time of not wanting to waste any of your money and resources, because, they're scant. So, but with that first intense interview we did in my sister's home, there were personal reasons. I mean, it was really weird to be in my sister's space, and I have this picture of my mother on a mantle, and I'm looking up at her, and then you're sitting across from me. So, but there was also a moment where I realized, and this ended up being a big theme as we were filming, that you went straight for substance. So you didn't know me at all, and you were asking me really hard questions about a new area that I was investigating. And I felt at first like, well, you can't divorce me, the person, from the substance of the work. And then I realized that that's actually kind of necessary to do, and something that I think as a woman advocate, I mix a lot of personal with my substance. And so you were forcing a bit of more of a divide that I actually ended up appreciating. And we can talk more about the impact of the film on my work later. But so it was a bit of a test, though, you're saying.
Yeah, but it's also, it's in the film, it's like you're looking for functions, So
right.
I was looking for somebody who could be almost like my private detective in the film, who in some way is representing me in the film without really doing it, but in some way the quest that I was doing. And I mean, as I always say, I'm not an intellectual, I'm not an academic. I haven't read 100 books that I try to make a film out of. So I'm actually starting up with simple questions. And I thought we got into that, asking those questions together, which was kind of interesting. But I mean, to be the main character of the film requires you have to donate a lot of your time.
Yes, you do.
If it's going to be good, I mean, a lot of super celebrity will say, okay, you will get 2 hours and that's it, and then you have to make the rest yourself. But what those guys don't understand is that it's impossible to do something real with that. Then that main character becomes really shallow and unpersonal. I mean, a main character of the film needs to be a human being, where you can see different sides of her personality and feel that. So also even the ugly sides, or the, or anxieties, or whatever it can be. So, and I thought the cool thing with you was that you actually, you don't censor yourself. Of course, there was moments where when you were crying and you went off because you didn't want to have your tears on camera.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, for me, your tears in film wouldn't suit my main character anyway, because it's also a balance of things.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that goes to the dividing. For me, I was happy enough with that, and wanting sometimes to preserve my own very deep. One thing people don't know about being an advocate is it is deeply personal. When I've been an advocate for all of my working life, so for 25 years, and it's deeply personal. It's not something I take lightly. And so I didn't want to, I think I gave about 90% of myself. I wanted to retain a little bit of that emotional connection to the work that wouldn't be part of some other project that was just about my experience. So I want to take us away from London and those beginning moments of the film, only to say, though, that after London, I went to Geneva and I presented to the UN my financialization report. And I remember you telling me that WG Films producer, Margaret, had watched my presentation on UN TV, and that she liked me, and that she found that I was a powerful presenter or something like that. And I remember you telling me that, and me feeling so validated in a way, just very validated, and realizing that how important it was for me to hear that a woman, someone I didn't know her, but I obviously respected her, and she's slightly older than me, that meant a lot. And then you and I met in Chile, and you introduced me to your team in Chile, who were women. So you had the director of photography, Janice da Silva from Brazil, and Alexandra Galvez. I guess she was line producing.
Janice
in
Davila.
Chile.
Anyway, it's fine.
Davila, sorry. And so there I was in the company of these amazing women. Those two women in particular are incredibly amazing. I think even the sound person was a woman. And that continued for the rest of our filming, that you have a very strong women team behind you. And I'm just interested in that. Is that purposeful? Was that purposeful with Push? Is that true in your other films? What did that mean to you?
I can give you a cynical answer if you want to. That's a short one.
I want the real answer.
The doc industry is a low-wage industry, so there's a lot of women in our industry. But I think that's maybe something very personal. When I was a kid, I was bullied, and I for many times I felt that I was hanging out more with girls. So I always felt quite close to girls, and then film is also like a very technical world in one way, and I have an experience of guys, wanted, the guys talk is sometimes tech talk, and I'm not technical at all. So I found out that to women on technical positions are like, it's easier for me. They don't talk about the technical details. We could talk about content. But I worked with Janice already in Bike versus Cars, and I worked with Iris Ing in Toronto also for bikes. And I think for that film, I actually wanted to have like a female gaze or female eye on things, because also bicycles can be told in a very boyish way, very sporty way. And I wanted to go away from that, because that film was about bikes in cities, about people, so, And then but also in the previous film, Big Boys Come Bananas, I also worked with a female cinematographer in Los Angeles and around the U.S. So I've been trying that, and I've found it's something that suits me well. I feel safe. So it's cool.
I felt safe too. That's exactly.
But then, of course,
I felt safe.
In this case, even more, because now we really wanted to have you. Because after this London, I went back and sat down with my editor. We were editing the stuff we did in London, and we were watching you over and over again, and all of us said, yes, she has the potential to be the main character of this film, and that was like a strong feeling. So how do we protect her? How do we make her stay in the project? Because if we start to film with you and you suddenly leave, then we are hanging there with a lot of material and we can't really close the film. So it's like it's also a risk when you start up with someone. So I thought, okay, we should stay with the same cinematographers, and they should be women, and they should be close to you, because they have to be really close if we're going to make this also emotionally strong, because we in the structure of the film, as it's some kind of journey. We want the main character to be someone that we follow, but we present all the time new knowledge. That's what we do. We get to hear about Blackstone. We get to hear about the criminal money. We get to know about people who are being kicked out to the streets, and we edit it in a way so all this stress and horrible facts lands on the main character's shoulders, your shoulders. So we need to be with you, so we as an audience actually suffer with you when we get to hear all this bad news.
Right.
And that's what we also, if you look at the structure of the film, you can also see there is the darkest moment of the main character. And from that darkest moment, we go up again. There is more hope. Can you identify the darkest moment?
In the film?
In the edit?
No. I can't.
You can't? Okay, so
I can't.
There is a moment where you are really small.
Oh, yeah, of course.
How tall are you?
Yeah, I'm 5'2". The ridiculous moment where I say...
And you're trying to...
You probably know the actual line. I don't know the actual line.
You're trying to change the whole conversation.
Change the world.
Yeah.
And I'm 5'2" from a nowhere town. Yeah.
And just before that, we've been with Saviano in Milan,
right.
hearing about the criminal money, which is like dark. A really dark moment. And then we take you down. But then, from that on, we go up. And that's Barcelona. You meet with Ada Colau. There's a new project, a shift coming up, and you're fighting back. So that's like that kind of. So we're up from the beginning of the film. We try to break you down, so we can also take you up.
Yeah,
and that would only work if the main character is open and also gives us time. It's impossible to do with somebody who just delivers a 2-hour sit-down interview somewhere.
Yeah, and it's also... that gets to another issue I wanted to talk to you about, because I think for me, Chile was a defining moment in my commitment to the film, actually, even though I was pretty excited and interested early on, but Chile was pretty early on. But it was there when, one, I felt so comfortable with you and your team. I realized that in some ways, I think documentary film makers and the people involved are my people, actually, even though I'm a longtime advocate. One thing you probably don't know about me, but actually when I left high school and was going to university, I applied to a film program a program at the University of Toronto to learn how to make films. And I chickened out. I was accepted. I had a residence, everything. And in August, I was to start in September. I chickened out because it was so outside my family experience and my experience. Everyone was very academic. And so I didn't. I ended up studying literature. And I had always thought I would end up doing some kind of film and journalism together. So I found my people in working with you for sure.
There's a joke going around, the critics of film and music. They're always the people who tried it but never made it. So you're probably then on that side too. You became an advocate.
Yeah, I became an advocate, but not a critic of film.
That's true. It's better.
But in Chile, we had a really important conversation. And I think what I learned in Chile was if I was going to be part of the film, it was going to be about trust. I had to trust you. I had to trust your team. I had to trust the process. And I also had to recognize I have expertise, and my expertise is not in filmmaking. And you have expertise, and it is in filmmaking. And you're an award-winning filmmaker. And I had to just say, it's not for me to do anything with this film except appear and try to push my issue and make sure you understand what it is that I need from the film. But you remember the conversation we had in Chile about trust?
Yeah, I remember our dear friend, the line producer in Chile, Alexandra Galvis. She was a little bit shocked because I was so blunt. But I basically told you about how it works. You can decide. I mean, we don't need any papers between us, no contracts, because you have as much power as I in this process. You can decide to leave, and I can't do anything about it. But I can also decide not to use you in the film. So it's like in that sense, a very open relation. It's like and it is true. I believe the only valid relation is a trust relation in filmmaking. And I think a lot of my work in all my films since the very beginning of my career is very much about building trust with the people we film. And then you need to show your ethics also in the editing. When you're out shooting, I think you can basically shoot everything, But in the editing, you have to be careful with your characters because you have a lot of power on your hands. We could destroy your reputation if we wanted to, if we really wanted to cut you in a weird way. But this is not a game show, so it's different. We are not building character in that way, and we need you to be. I mean, for me, it's important that anyone who is in one of my films could say, yes, that's me. That's me. Yeah. I might be, yes, I'm also sometimes stupid. I'm also sometimes very, whatever.
Yeah.
So that I just want to be clear. You can leave, and then you will really kill the economy of this project. So don't, but,
that's right.
But you can.
Yeah. No, and I think it was that there was an equality that you were expressing there, that between you and me, we had an equality. And that actually really helped me. A lot of people were saying in my ear, aren't you worried? What if he portrays you poorly, or you don't like the message? But I always trusted that you wouldn't do that. It wasn't in your best interest to do that. You were as committed to the issues as I am, and you are as committed as I am.
And I mean, this is sorry. No, but it's still cool to tell people that you never want to see any film material. Yeah, that was really a message from you. I don't want to see anything.
Yeah, I didn't. And I didn't see anything until the very, very, very end. But I'm interested to know what that's like as a filmmaker when you have your main character saying, "I don't want to see your film." How does that feel?
It's the best. It's the best. It's the best. It's editing is a process, and it's a very long process. And if you get the people you film sitting in the editing room a lot, they might start to question things that probably will never end up in the film. I had a very bad hair day that day, and no, it's or people say, if that's in the film, my mother will feel sad, whatever, So it can be quite often it's the most random details that people have hang-ups around. So it's, of course, we wanted to show you the film just before we were releasing it, so you were among the first to see it, and I think you actually got to see an earlier cut because you were visiting Sweden anyway. So that's why you could see it. But but you remember that feeling sitting here and watching? It's actually in the room where I'm standing, the editing room. So.
And I wasn't visiting Sweden anyway, I don't think. I think I made a special trip in the fall once you had a rough cut, but like decent enough cut for me to look at. I was experiencing a ton of anxiety about... I didn't want you to make the film. At one point, I remember articulating, at least in my head, like, I know we filmed for 2 years, but I really don't want you to make the film anymore. I don't want to be in a film. I don't want to have anything to do with the film. Then I realized it was just anxiety. And yeah, I do remember sitting and watching it with you and Eric, the editor. And the experience was incredibly emotional for me. I mean, in so many ways, it was emotional. Of course, you're remembering, as you're watching, you're remembering everything that was actually happening while the filming was happening. But also, it was a huge process, a huge piece of work. You had put your heart and soul into it. I had, Eric had, the cinematographers had, all the line producers, sound people. I mean, it's a huge thing, and it did feel huge to me and really emotional, and a part of me is now on this screen. And anyway,
it's
also
emotional for us, of course. It's not an easy moment, and I know that a film can. I mean, it's almost impossible for anyone who are letting her to be filmed to understand the impact the film will have on their lives, because it can have a big impact. So that's why we have to be responsible and to be loving and caring about our main characters. Even I would say, even if they're criminals or thugs or whatever. I mean, you still have to be honest and fair, I think.
Yeah, well, I think you were both of those things in Push, for sure. I want to bring up one sort of controversial thing. It takes us in a slightly different direction, but after the screening of the film, in every post-screening panel that I've done with you and alone, someone will raise the scene that takes place in the United Nations. I am presenting my financialization report, and the camera is showing the UN officials who are supposed to be listening and caring about this major human rights issue that I'm bringing to their attention, but they are on their cell phones, looking around. One guy right at the end is scanning through photos of Rolex watches to see what he might buy next. And so people always ask me, well, the film has a cynicism about the UN. And, at the time I was a, UN rapporteur. And so sort of, how useful is the UN? And my sense isn't that the film is trying to say the UN is useless. Quite the opposite, actually. You have as your main character a UN official. But I'm interested to know what you were trying to say with that bit. And then larger.
I think if the UN had commissioned me to make a film, some people believe that you commissioned me to make a film, you can be sure that scene wouldn't be included. So, and that's the strength of independent filmmaking, that we are actually telling stories in our own way. And so we are not commissioned by anyone. Then we also can be a little bit more political incorrect, and we can even make jokes about something we respect. We respect the UN system, but it's true. A lot of people were not listening, and this delegate from Qatar was sitting there checking out extremely expensive watches. I thought that was an amazing story. But remember also, when you were preparing your financialization speech,
Yes.
you said, you were talking with Bruce Porter, how shall we do this so people listen? Because if they don't, they will just sit down and watch their iPhones and other stuff. So it was a reference to something you had said before. And of course, I told Janice, we were filming in New York, go for the cell phones. Of course, that was something I said, because I remember we had that line shot. It was actually in London we shot that
in
line
London,
when you were writing this speech. So of course, that's something that gives some kind of continuity to the film. It's also fun, And some people laugh, some people get angry, whatever. I mean, but it's also giving our main character some resistance. Life is not too easy for her. And that's something we wanted to create, because then when you turn the tide with Julieta coming in and you start to build a shift, then we feel happy for you because you've had a tough ride. So that scene is a part of your tough ride. So it's also a narrative element, let's say.
I to be honest, no one ever really asks me what I think of that scene, and I love it for the reasons that you said, but also that's my everyday experience. Those are representatives of governments, and they are not listening, and they're not doing their jobs well enough. Otherwise, we wouldn't have homelessness across the world, evictions and forced evictions everywhere, right? And this financialization. So I really love that moment because it's truth telling. They are in a privileged position and they're not doing their jobs. So for me, I actually quite like it, even though it is, of course, jarring because it paints the UN in a bad light. But maybe, as you say, the UN needs to be painted in its truth. There is truth to that. And I have been at many sessions where government officials are on their phones, etc. And it is what I'm pushing against, actually. It's exactly.
But one thing about filming close to a character is that in one way, you speed up getting to know that person. You speed up a relation, maybe also a friendship, because it's a very intense relation. That also happens with the cinematographers and the editors. Definitely. And it's like you work so intensely. We work extremely long hours. Many of these hours you were on, we were working 12, 15 hours and then up really early in the morning again. It's all because we are so low budget, so we really need to bring home as much material as possible. And we need to get back with the right material, because when I went out to a place with you, I've been sitting here with Eric, my editor, talking about, so what do we need? So it's like I was really focused on getting the right material. And at the same time also open to see what happened, because sometimes something else happens. But if that happens, I have to recognize, is this for the film or is this not for the film? Because that's also about knowing your own project, which is also a process, to understand what works, what is interesting for this film. But I mean, so you said this tweet was 3.5 years ago, and now we're doing a podcast. What is the story behind that? I mean, it means that this like forced speeded up relation is actually now turned into be something very different. The film premiered in March last year, 2019, at a huge, beautiful theater in Copenhagen. Saskia Sassen was also there. We then had an amazing
audience.
Amazing audience. Yeah. We had also an amazing premiere in Toronto, at the Bloor, and then at the Lightbox. We've been to the biggest theater in Munich. We have been to so many we have met. I mean, we are at the Castro in San Francisco. This amazing, beautiful, huge cinema. We've been to so many places and met audiences everywhere. And of course, a lot of people think that you commissioned the film or we made a film together.
Yes.
And it's fine. It's fine. I don't expect people to understand our process. But now we're making this podcast. It's kind of...
We are.
So and I think we have that in common. We want to understand things. And we want to formulate what we see, which is not that easy. So we have been quite soon after our first meeting in London and after the Chile shoot, we started to send each other WhatsApps with articles and questions. So what is this? How do we understand this? And during this process, we tried to understand, so where is that all this money coming from, you know? And suddenly we said, oh shit, it's our own pension money. And I said, why don't you meet the Korean pension fund when you're on mission in Korea?
Yeah.
And then you did. They really refused to let us film. We got like 2 minutes.
That's right.
Which was like a bit frustrating. But the knowledge was there. We were going for something, and then we could help each other in that.
Yeah. We're running short of time, but I'll say that one of the most amazing things about all of this has been to meet someone, you, as curious as me about the same issues with very similar interest in change from a different vantage point as a filmmaker, not as necessarily an advocate. Although I always say, you're the best right to housing advocate I know. But one of the biggest takeaways for me that is, I think you describe your work or have described your work to me as somewhat lonely. You're a director, right? So you have to have the vision. You have to drive forward your projects. They're your films. Yes, they involve a ton of people, but there's a loneliness there. And certainly as rapporteur and now as global director of The Shift, there's a loneliness to what I do. I have to have vision and leadership and the courage to speak out, and similar to you. And you've made my journey a little less lonely. So big thanks to you, Fredrik.
That's sweet. And you also make me a little bit less lonely. It's you know, I also, like you do, I travel almost alone all the time to different shoots. Then I work with amazing people, but we don't always have the budget to fly in the same people or fly out with a team, because the film funding isn't that strong in Sweden or I mean for most documentary filmmakers. So we have to be smart on how we spend our money. So yes, it's quite lonely. And so, no, it's been interesting, and I don't think I've been able to in any other film in my career to meet a main character like you. So it's been a lucky ride, a very lucky ride, and so it's fun that the film is doing so well, and it's fun that we're also doing this podcast.
Absolutely.
Remember. The film has created a lot of change also. It's been a part of the debate in many countries.
Absolutely.
And you describe that sometimes like the perfect storm, when the film, your work, local activists, local reporters are like suddenly entering into the same language, and then boom, something happens. And then we should talk about that next week, maybe.
Let's do that. Thanks, Fredrik.
Bye.
Bye, Fredrik.